There is a concrete that gets stronger when you submerge it in seawater. Modern concrete dissolves in seawater within decades. This concrete crystallizes, it seals its own cracks from the inside. It has been sitting at the bottom of the Mediterranean for 2,000 years and it is not crumbling, it is not corroding, it is harder today than the day it was poured. The Pantheon's dome, 142 feet across, unreinforced, no steel, no rebar, has been standing since 128 AD. It is still the largest unreinforced concrete dome on Earth. No modern engineer has built anything close to it without steel. The recipe that beats everything we have built in 200 years was written down in 25 BC. We have known where to find it the entire time, we chose not to look. And that choice is now costing the planet 8% of all global carbon emissions every single year. The archive opens in 25 BC in Rome, where a military engineer named Marcus Vitruvius Pollio is finishing a 10-volume treatise for the Emperor Augustus. He calls it De Architectura, on architecture. Volume 2 covers materials. In it, Vitruvius describes a volcanic sand found near the coastal town of Pozzuoli, on the Bay of Naples. He calls it pulvis putiolanus pozzolana. He gives the ratios precisely: 1 part lime to 2 parts pozzolana for underwater structures, 1 to 3 for buildings on land. He describes pouring it in wooden forms into the sea and watching it harden beneath the waves. He had seen it work. The harbour at Baiae, in the Gulf of Pozzuoli on the Bay of Naples, is where Roman hydraulic concrete was born. The earliest surviving structures date to before 100 BC. The breakwaters and harbour pillars that Roman engineers poured into the sea, they are still standing underwater today. Marie Jackson's research team drilled cores directly from those submerged structures. They pulled up 2,000-year-old concrete and put it under a microscope. What they found was not a material in the process of failing, it was a material still growing. Vitruvius wrote it down. The text survived. It sat in European libraries throughout the Middle Ages, copied by monks, studied by Renaissance architects. Every educated engineer in Europe for 15 centuries had access to the recipe. The ruins were visible to anyone who travelled to Italy. The harbour walls were still standing underwater. So were the markets of Trajan, built from 100 AD to 112 AD, a 6-level complex of over 150 rooms housing shops, offices and administrative functions cut into the Quirinal Hill, still structurally sound nearly 2,000 years later. So were the baths of Caracalla, completed in 216 AD, which covered over 27 acres and could accommodate 1,600 bathers simultaneously. The concrete barrel vaults that spanned those rooms, rising over 100 feet without steel reinforcement, are still standing. So was the Pantheon, completed around 128 AD, its unreinforced dome still the largest in the world after 19 centuries. The Romans did not build things that lasted, they built things that improved, and the recipe that made all of it possible was in the library. And in 1824, a bricklayer from Leeds named Joseph Aspdin patented Portland cement anyway. To understand what was lost, you have to understand what Roman concrete actually does. The mix is simple: volcanic ash, lime, seawater and chunks of rock for aggregate. But the chemistry is not simple at all. When seawater percolates through the tiny pores of the cured concrete, it reacts with the volcanic ash and with a mineral called philipsite that is naturally present in the aggregate. The reaction produces crystals, interlocking plates of a rare mineral called aluminous tobermorite that grow continuously inside the concrete over decades and centuries. Tobermorite has a layered crystalline structure that resists fracturing. The plates lock into each other at the microscopic level, binding the surrounding matrix tighter and tighter with every passing year. The longer Roman concrete sits in seawater, the stronger it gets. Modern Portland cement concrete exposed to the same seawater does the opposite. Chloride ions attack the calcium silicate hydrate matrix. The concrete softens. If there is steel reinforcement inside, and modern concrete almost always contains steel, the chloride reaches the steel and starts the rust cycle. Rust expands, concrete cracks, the cracks let in more seawater, the steel rusts faster, the structure fails. This is not a worst-case scenario. It is the standard service life of a modern coastal structure, 50 to 75 years before major rehabilitation is required. The Roman harbour walls have been in seawater for 2,000 years. There is more. Roman concrete has no iron. No iron means nothing to rust. No rust means no expansion, no cracking, no spalling, no failure cascade. The Pantheon dome, 4,535 metric tons of concrete, 142 feet across, walls 21 feet thick at the base, tapering to around 5 feet at the oculus, has stood without a single piece of steel reinforcement for nearly 19 centuries. Compressive strength tests on ancient Roman concrete from ruins in Libya measured 20 megapascals, comparable to standard modern concrete, achieved without the industrial supply chain and without specialized equipment. 900 kilograms of carbon dioxide per ton, every ton. The world produces more than 4 billion tons of cement annually. The cement industry emits 8% of all global carbon dioxide. More than aviation, more than shipping, more than every car on every road in Europe combined. If the cement industry were ranked as a country by carbon output, it would be the third largest emitter on Earth, behind only China and the United States. The chemical reaction that produces Portland cement clinker releases carbon dioxide directly from the limestone itself, in addition to the fuel required to heat it to 1,450 degrees Celsius. There is no way to make Portland cement without releasing that carbon. It is inherent to the process. Roman concrete requires no clinker. The lime can be produced at lower temperatures. The volcanic ash requires no industrial processing. The carbon footprint is a fraction of what Portland cement demands, and the structure lasts 20 times longer, meaning 20 times less material consumed over a building's useful life. The math is not subtle. The industry ignored it for 200 years. Portland cement did not win because it was better. It won because it was faster, and it worked everywhere. Vitruvius's recipe depended on pozzolana volcanic ash from the Bay of Naples, abundant near Rome and available by sea throughout the Mediterranean, but not easily sourced in Leeds, Manchester, or Birmingham in 1824. Portland cement could be manufactured anywhere limestone and clay existed, which meant anywhere on Earth. It cured in days rather than months. It achieved predictable compressive strength that engineers could calculate, specify, and rely upon. For the Industrial Revolution, railways, factories, sewers, bridges, and urban expansion on a scale Rome never attempted, these were not minor advantages, they were everything. The speed of industrial construction in the 19th century required a material that behaved the same way in every city and every climate, with no dependence on specific geology. The choice was rational. Nobody suppressed Roman concrete, nobody buried the knowledge. Vitruvius was on the library shelf. The engineers who chose Portland cement read the same history every engineer read. They made a decision that made sense in 1824. The decision calcified. Portland cement became the default not just for the Victorian era, but for every era that followed. Building codes were written around its performance characteristics. Engineering schools taught its chemistry. Supply chains worth hundreds of billions of dollars were constructed to produce, ship, and pour it. The entire global infrastructure of construction was built on top of a material that emits 900 kilograms of carbon per ton and fails in seawater in 50 years. And when researchers started asking why Roman harbour walls were getting stronger underwater, while modern sea walls were crumbling, the industry's response for decades was interesting, not actionable, not our problem. ARPAE eventually funded Jackson with $1.4 million. Mazik spun out a startup. Ashraf is publishing. The shift is finally happening 200 years late. The problem is now everyone's. The American Society of Civil Engineers estimates the United States alone has more than 43,000 miles of coastline requiring active infrastructure management, seawalls, breakwaters, jetties and harbour structures, almost all of it built with Portland cement in the 20th century. almost all of it now corroding on the 50-year schedule that Roman concrete ignores entirely. The global bill for concrete infrastructure maintenance and replacement runs into the trillions. Every decade, the world tears out corroded concrete and pours new Portland cement to replace it, releasing another 900 kilograms of carbon per ton in the process. The replacement cycle is not a side effect of the industry, it is the business model. The crack in that wall opened in a geology lab in the early 2000s. Marie Jackson, a research associate professor at the University of Utah, was examining cores of Roman maritime concrete pulled from harbour structures submerged along the Italian coast, including the breakwaters at Baiae, where the material had been sitting in seawater since before the birth of Augustus. She expected to find a degraded matrix. Concrete that had survived was concrete that had resisted attack, held on, endured, remained essentially unchanged. That is how durable materials work. You make something hard enough that the environment cannot break it down. What she found under the microscope was the opposite. The samples had not resisted the seawater, they had incorporated it. Luminous tobermorite crystals, a mineral so rare it almost never forms outside of geothermal systems and metamorphic rocks, were growing inside the concrete. Interlocking plates filled the microcracks, binding the matrix tighter than it had been when it was poured. The harbour wall was not the same material it had been in 100 BC. It was a better material. The ocean had spent 2,000 years improving it. Jackson published. The paper circulated in academic geology. Almost no one in the construction industry read it. She kept working. In 2017, she led a team that traced the full mechanism: the seawater, the phillipsite, the tobermorite reaction, and the continuous crystalline growth. The data was unambiguous. Roman concrete did not simply resist degradation, it actively improved. The sea made it stronger. She began developing modern marine concrete formulations that replicate the reaction. In 2023, Roman-style marine concrete was placed in Long Island Sound for the first time in nearly 2 millennia to test its performance in real seawater. The samples are expected to grow stronger over time. The same year, Admir Masick, an associate professor at MIT, published the other half of the answer. Every sample of Roman concrete contains small white fragments, chunks of lime scattered through the material like pale gravel. Engineers had noticed them for centuries and assumed they were evidence of sloppy mixing. Improperly slaked lime. Masick disagreed. Roman engineers were not consistently careless across a continent for 5 centuries. He analysed the chunks. They were not made from slaked lime, they were made from quicklime, added dry before the water. Hot mixing. When the water hit, the reaction generated temperatures exceeding 200 degrees Celsius at the hotspots. The concrete hardened faster, and some of the quicklime, encased by the speed of the reaction, remained intact inside the mix as small, brittle, calcium-rich fragments, ready and waiting. When the concrete cracked, water entered. The water found the lime. The lime dissolved, releasing calcium ions that crystallized directly inside the crack as calcium carbonate, essentially limestone. Within days to weeks of water exposure, cracks in Roman concrete sealed themselves shut. Not metaphorically, chemically. Masick's team proposed the mechanism in 2023, backed by analysis of a construction site at Privernum in central Italy. The smoking gun confirmation came in subsequent excavation and analysis. An unfinished room in Pompeii had dry raw materials still sitting in piles on the floor, quicklime, premixed with volcanic ash exactly as the hot mixing hypothesis required, frozen by the eruption of Vesuvius in 79 AD. 2,000 years later, the evidence was undisturbed. The builders had been mid-pour. Masick tested the mechanism in the lab. A chunk of Roman recipe concrete was cracked and water was introduced. Within 2 weeks, the crack had sealed completely. An identical chunk made without quicklime never healed. The water flowed through indefinitely. He has since spun out a startup from his MIT research to commercialize self-healing concrete. He is not waiting for the industry to invite him. The implications are not incremental. A structure built with Roman formula concrete in a marine environment requires no steel reinforcement. It resists seawater. It heals its own cracks. It grows stronger with time rather than weaker. It produces a fraction of the carbon dioxide of Portland cement per tonne manufactured, and it lasts not 50 years but centuries, meaning a coastal seawall built today to Roman specifications would still be standing when whatever replaces our civilization is trying to figure out why it held. The volcanic ash problem that made Vitruvius's recipe impractical in Victorian England no longer exists. Warder Ashraf, a civil engineer at the University of Texas at Arlington, has developed a Roman-inspired concrete that replaces pozzolana, which is abundant near Naples and scarce in Leeds, with kaolinite clay, a material available on every continent. The recipe is now geography independent. The material can be made anywhere on Earth. Roman concrete cannot replace Portland cement in every application. For the structural cores of skyscrapers for heavily loaded highway bridges, the compressive strength of Portland cement is genuinely necessary, and Roman formula concrete cannot substitute. Mazik says this plainly. The distinction matters. But for sea walls, for roads, for marine structures and harbour infrastructure, for retaining walls, and for every mile of coastal concrete currently dissolving in the same salt air that Roman concrete feeds on, it is exactly the answer. And that is most of the concrete on Earth. Not a niche. Most of it. There is a concrete that has been sitting at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea for 2,000 years, getting stronger. Vitruvius wrote the recipe in 25 BC. The Pantheon has been standing since 128 AD. Marie Jackson found the tobermorite crystals in the early 2000s. Admir Masik identified the hot mixing mechanism in 2023 and found the physical evidence in a frozen construction site in Pompeii. Warder Ashraf has replaced the Bay of Naples with kaolinite clay, available on every continent. The chemistry is understood. The material can be made anywhere. The recipe works. The industry producing 4 billion tonnes of Portland cement annually, emitting 8% of global carbon dioxide and generating hundreds of billions in revenue from a material that fails in seawater in 50 years, will tell you the transition is complicated, that codes need rewriting, that supply chains take time, that performance data requires decades to accumulate. All of that is true. What they will not tell you is that a bricklayer from Leeds chose speed over durability in 1824. The industry built its entire business model on the replacement cycle that decision created. And the ruins of a better answer have been sitting in the Mediterranean, getting stronger every year since before Christianity existed. The Pantheon is 1,897 years old. The seawall your city paid to repair last decade was built in 1978. If you build, or you know someone who does, look up what Jackson and Masik are putting in the water. That is how this knowledge survives.